ready to never see the trailer for Speak No Evil again. I have been loving the running joke though on Twitter where people are like, can you believe that there's been no trailer for Speak No Evil even though it comes out this week? I think it's hilarious, all the commentary on the marketing of this movie, because obviously it's very abundant and that is paying off for them, to be honest. I think they are definitely marketing this to appeal not only to horror fans, they have the budget. I think this is where Blumhouse spent all of his money this year, because clearly it was not spent in the other Blumhouse movies. And he put every cent he had into the marketing of Speak No Evil, and it paid off because my theater was basically sold out and it's making a lot of money right now in the box office. It's already made $5 million on the first weekend, and I predict it's going to make its budget back. So of course, Speak No Evil is the remake, the American remake of the Danish movie Speak No Evil from 2022, which of course was just 2 years ago. So they saw that movie and decided almost immediately that they were going to remake it because they had to then announce the cast back in early 2023. So they were prepped and ready to go as soon as this movie came out. They were like, let's do that one. So they wasted no time in making this remake. I will say, I was not excited about this when it was first announced because I think everyone was like questioning why did we even need this remake, because it's just the original is only 2 years old. But then I saw that James Watkins was going to be the director of this movie, and then I was like questioning everything. I was thinking maybe it would actually be good. I don't know. So James Watkins directed The Woman in Black and Eden Lake, and I love both of those movies, and they are very different from one another, but I absolutely love both. It still was not necessary, and here's why. Not only was the original just 2 years ago, it was also primarily in English, and I feel like if that's the case, we don't need an American remake of the same movie if they're both in, you know what I mean? Like, I understand maybe why they'd want to, and I get their motivation with this story and like the new movie, but that just doesn't make any sense to me because it's not like it's still a foreign film, but you can watch it without reading a lot of subtitles. So if that's the issue, what are we doing here? The main reason why this remake does not make any sense is that the original has a social commentary background as to the politeness and the passiveness of Danish people and the Danish culture. From what I understand, that's what the director had said, and a lot of people in my comments from that culture were explaining that that's how it is. I actually have a quote from the director of the original, Tafdrup. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. He explains that it's a Scandinavian thing. We don't like to talk about how we are feeling. We try to stay polite and behave nicely, suppressing what we really think. That's very Scandinavian. We are so dictated by social manners and social views. If you compare it just to American or English people, which is funny because the remake are American and English people, we don't talk about our feelings so much. We don't show so much excitement. We just underplay everything. So that creates a lot of awkwardness in social gatherings. So the commentary was intentional in the original, and obviously the original is very infuriating to watch because they are so passive that they get away with basically everything. That doesn't really translate to then American and English people. I understand the director, James Watkins, wanted to portray the American culture and English culture as a certain way in the movie as well. Like, he went in with another social commentary intent, but I don't know if it works as well as the Danish social commentary in the original. So this is what James Watkins had to say about his take on the story. He says, I suppose the horror of everyday life and how we all try to negotiate it. There's horror enough in that you could almost not have the whole underlying story, and that fascinated me. What I've taken from the original film is the satire, the exploration of the social rules and how we react. You can give people an incredibly tense roller coaster ride that has thematic nourishment and things to take away and talk about in the pub, but it can be fun. So his intent was to take some of those elements from the original, but also make it fun and have, you know, different layers to it. So let's talk about the movie on its own and not necessarily compare it right away. I will be doing some comparisons and talk about the endings and compare the endings and everything and answer the question, is it as bleak as the original? But I will be doing a spoiler section for most of that. So let's just talk about the movie as a whole, in general. Obviously, James McAvoy makes a killer makes a killer villain. He has expressions that he makes that are very unsettling, and I think that works really well in this kind of movie where you have to underplay a lot of the tension, and the horror comes in psychologically for most of the movie until we get probably to the last quarter. So for him to have those like displays of his rage sneak through a little bit, adds to the gradual tension of this movie. And so I think you have to be really talented to really get that across throughout the entire movie. And I will say the gradual tension was done pretty well for this movie. I probably would have wanted a little bit more throughout, but I feel like I'm already comparing it to the original. It's just hard. They kept the same tone, and you know, most of the movie was pretty similar to the original, so I understand that that was part of the gradual tension, is like just how much can we push these people. Obviously in this kind of movie you're picturing yourself in that situation and how far you would go and where you would draw the line, and I love that kind of experience in watching a movie like this. And it goes without saying, when you're watching a remake, you try your best to set aside your expectations and like the original story in your head, but at the same time it does reduce some of the tension for a movie like this when you're watching it knowing what happens a lot of the time. So with the gradual tension buildup of this movie, it's fine. But because I already knew a lot going in, it kind of takes away from that a little bit. And I think they honestly kicked themselves in the butt with that as well with the marketing. The marketing for this movie pissed me off. Like, I know I made a joke about it in the beginning, but it really bothered me because they showed some very pivotal points from the story in the trailers. And I felt like a lot of us went into the original not knowing much about the story. We just know something uncomfortable happens with this couple and we don't know what is happening, but they make it very abundantly clear in the marketing what's going on in this story, and I don't love that. I felt like we could have kept it a little bit more of a mystery, but they showed way too much. They showed too many trailers, but also too much within the trailer, and that really annoyed me. So all of that took away from my viewing experience because you had seen so much from the trailers. You couldn't avoid them either. It's not like you can just not watch this trailer because they were everywhere. But also if you've seen the original, you kind of know what to expect a lot of the time. So it's fine. The first two acts are a lot like the remake. It's decently done, you know, like it's competently made. There's nothing really standing out to me other than James McAvoy's performance. That's the only thing that really like stole the show, I feel like. And he obviously like made the movie what it was and like made it have that much more tension. I didn't feel very strongly about this movie either way. I didn't really have many thoughts leaving the theater last night. I was just like, it's a movie, you know, it kind of plays out like a standard horror movie to me and is missing a lot of that originality that the original had. So none of this really felt that unique to me. It kind of felt just like a story that's been done before, not only because it has, but because it kind of did this standard horror formula. So I'm going to talk more about the endings, compare the two, and do some more comparisons of the movies. Now I'm going to get into spoilers, so if you haven't seen it yet, I really don't want to say too much about it because if I say either way, if it's similar or different, that's a spoiler for if you are intending to watch this movie if you've seen the original. So just saying that alone would be a spoiler, so I'm saving that for just a second. But yeah, I'm not obsessed with it, you know, it's just a movie. Okay, let's get into spoilers. I think this movie really failed at keeping the commentary. Like, the whole point of the original is what I already talked about, and they completely took all of that away with the last act of this movie. So it is completely different from the original. And I understand why they did this, because while I was in the theater, I'm like questioning, are they going to push it as far? Are they going to make it as disturbing? I highly doubt it, because Blumhouse never really does that. And I was correct, because they did not push the envelope. They did not push the disturbing aspects of this movie like the original did, because the original, easily one of the most disturbing movies I've ever seen, just given that ending is so bleak and just so tragic that it's like a one-time watch kind of movie. And I would have been pleasantly surprised if they decided to remake it shot for shot. You know, honestly, I wish that they kind of did that. I was like mentally preparing myself to have to live through that again, and they didn't do that, which I wasn't necessarily surprised, but I would have liked for them to push it a little bit more. To me, this remake is like they heard all of the frustrations and criticisms of the original and decided to correct all of that. They're like, oh, this movie made you really mad because they weren't doing anything in it and they weren't standing up for themselves. Well, let's do that, the same movie, but we'll make them actually stand up for themselves and survive and get away. Okay, so the original takes place in a car, like the ending is taking place in the car, and this one takes place entirely within the house. So it's like a hunt in the house. They're like trying to escape while these two people are trying to kill them. A lot of tension, but like I said, it really played out in the end like a standard horror movie. Like nothing really felt original. I could see the beats coming. Like I could, you know, predict what was going to happen, who was going to come out from where, you know, with the fake outs. And there was also this strange man in this story. What was the point of him? I think the point was just to have another body, you know, just have another kill. But he was, why? So the first two acts are very much like the original. However, at some point the mom just like snaps, gets into mom mode, and she's like, no one's gonna touch my daughter, and does everything, kills everyone, does everything. The husband's the one who's incompetent, whereas in the original they're both passive and incompetent. So that made more sense to me than this story of like the mom just becoming this badass, which I respect, I appreciate it. Maybe I would be like that too, but it just came out of nowhere when she just like, the line had been pushed so far for her and she's like, I'm done and I'm gonna do something about it. I didn't love that change. I wasn't necessarily wanting to see the end of the original again because it's very dark. I do appreciate they did try to add a disturbing aspect into this story. It's revealed that his wife, the villain's wife, is also a victim, which I don't believe was the case in the original. I think it was just two weird people. And they hint at this earlier in the movie where they say they've been together for 17 years and the husband's like, how old would that have made her when they met? Like she's so young. And it's revealed that she was about their daughter's age, Agnes's age, which she's 11 in this movie, when he abducted her and made her his wife, basically Stockholm Syndrome, something, convinced her, threatened her over the years, over 17 years, and now she's his wife and they participate in this together. And when she dies, he decides to take Agnes, their daughter, as his new wife, who's 11. And there's a whole scene where she pretends that she started her period and he's really creepy and he's like, you're a woman now. And he's like looking at her a certain way, you know what I mean? And that's disturbing. Like that's, I think, where a lot of the horror is in this movie, is that thought of what if that happens? And then if you've seen the original, you're like, what if that actually does happen? And he successfully like kidnaps this girl and makes her his wife. So that was disturbing. I'm glad they added that element into this to make it not only differentiate it from the original, but also make it disturbing, because the first one is disturbing. You can't deny that. So they had to have something in this movie to make it, you know, comparable to the original. It's not. I don't love the ending, how they get away and they just survive, or everyone survives. Well, every good person survives. Obviously the couple dies, but it's like, it was just kind of a letdown. Like, nope. The boy aunt has his like redemption arc, which is sweet. It's very sweet. As a parent now, I can appreciate that, but that's not what the original was. You know what I mean? I feel like I could ramble on forever about that aspect and how they just like kind of killed the social commentary from the first one in that last act of the movie. Just didn't work necessarily for me. I don't know. I'm not obsessed with this movie. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't bad. I enjoyed a lot of the tension, and James McAvoy, but at the same time, like, it's better than I thought it was, than I thought it was going to be honest. Like, I thought I was going to give it a really negative review. I can see why people are really enjoying it, but the original is better, you know? It's a better movie. I feel like as infuriating as that movie is, it makes sense as to why it is the way it is. And I feel like they lost all that aspect in the remake. But I would love to hear what your thoughts are on the Speak No Evil remake. I feel like everyone's been talking about it lately. So have you seen it yet? Leave your comments down below. I hope you enjoyed, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.